I'm going to take you along with me as I try to achieve the 100 things in a week challenge. This is something that's sort of just made up. It was inspired by 1 week 100 people challenge, but instead of doing people, I'm doing birds. I challenged my college students to pick whatever they wanted, whatever interests them the most. I wasn't going to dictate what they were going to draw 100 of. That's a lot. It's a lot. So I preferred they chose their own obsessions, and I said I would work right along with them and try to get the equivalent done over spring break. And we'll go back soon and see how we all did. But this is what I've got so far. And these are quite finished drawings. They're kind of elaborate. There's lots of detail. They're kind of polished. Maybe not little 13 down there. But they're not all going to be that way. Obviously, I would never make it to 100 in the time frame. But what I caught on film for you was this hummingbird sketch, as well as these two sweet little ones in mixed media. So I'm very excited to show you how I combine Tombow brush markers used as if they were watercolor or watercolor colored pencils. I also use Prismacolor watercolor colored pencils, and I use some permanent ink pens, brush pens, and a water-soluble graphite pencil. So, oh, and Posca paint pens. So a lot of different medias combining to make those little illustrations. And I'm really excited to show you that process. It was just intuitive. I didn't have a plan for it, but I really did want to see what the Tombow markers did when used in this watercolor effect, and I think you'll enjoy it, especially if you don't have your own watercolor set yet. You just want to play with markers. They have to be water-soluble markers, but you could probably even do that with Crayola markers, which are water-soluble. I'll have to do that in a future video. Maybe you'll be inspired to do your own 100 things challenge. If so, you can always go to my Instagram at Doddington Creates, and you'll see in one of my posts about the birds that I'm using a hashtag so that I can see my students' work if they choose to do this challenge. It is 100 things challenge, drawing challenge, I think. Check it out there. There's a hashtag. I want it to become a thing. I would love to do this every year. I'll stop chattering and get to sketching with you. All right, jumping in here with a Colorase, a Prismacolor Colorase pencil crayon. These are amazing. I just got them this year. And I had never used colored pencils that were erasable before, not in my artwork anyway. Interestingly enough, the soft core Premier Prismacolor colored pencils erase as well. If you're very light with them on a certain type of paper, my students and I realized this year that if they work really lightly in that colored pencil on like pastel paper, that they actually can make, erase a little bit and make corrections, which is amazing. And we also discovered we could use those very nice, they're high quality colored pencil from Prismacolor, the Premier. We could use those mixed with chalk pastel as well. And those turned out really great. It was so neat to combine those two materials. So I just mentioned that here because I figure if you're here, you enjoy mixed media and you might want to know those little tricks. If you haven't tried a chalk pastel with colored pencil, try it out. You can see here I've got the ones, any colored pencil I'm using that has the eraser on it, those are the Colorase. And I don't really end up erasing a ton, I don't think. But here I am grabbing a Tombow marker and adding in the shadow on this hummingbird's head. And this is a white Posca paint pen. It's acrylic paint. These are the best quality. And I just did a little highlight in the eyeball there, and the eyeball was first done with a Jane Davenport finishing line pen, so black ink. And what's neat is that you can lay down this acrylic, and I'm laying it on top of acrylic, right? So I'm using my finger there to kind of blend a little bit, adding marker to that, and some more shadows, blocking it in. It was really nice. It felt so nice to add this marker on top of that turquoise acrylic that's covering the whole page. And this is the finishing line pen by Jane Davenport that I'm using again. There's a whole bunch in different sizes. This kit comes with 10 different pieces. You get watercolor ink pens, waterproof ink pens, and you get them in chisel tipped and brush tipped, which is super nice. Grabbing some water with my brush here and fanning out a bit of that ink. Before it dries, it's movable, and then obviously once it dries, it will be waterproof. Testing my colors on the side, always a good idea. I'm trying to get this iridescence will be interesting to try to achieve on this hummingbird. You know how they're iridescent. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to accomplish that yet, but experimenting is that's the name of the game. It's what it's all about with mixed media. On the bird above, you can see I used oil pastel, I should say. I used oil pastel on the bird above, which worked pretty well. It came off and transferred really well onto that acrylic base. Now I've got a regular Prismacolor. Oh, no, I don't. It's Colorase. Kidding. Just kidding. Still using the Colorase. Mixed in with what I'm using right now. See the wood barrel or the wood sort of casing? These are my watercolor pencil crayons. So once I add water to that, like it's laying on some nice dark shadows right now, but if I put water on that, it will bleed because it is meant to. So most of the ones in my sort of peachy colored cup there, anyone that has that wood looking case to it those are my watercolor ones. And no two watercolor pencil crayons are the same. Seriously, the quality does matter. I've had some pretty bad ones in the past, and I thought, I hate watercolor pencil crayons. These are dumb. They don't work really well. You have to add so much to get any sort of color or vibrancy, and that's not the case with these Prismacolor ones. They're really soft, and they're a lot more fun to use than ones I've used in the past. And I've probably used maybe 3 or 4 different brands in the past, and each time thought, ugh, this is just, I don't like the effect. It's not juicy. So don't judge your watercolor pencil crayons if you don't have a very expensive brand or a very, like an artist grade brand, then it just is not going to behave the same way. So that's just something to note. I'm really enjoying how the lighter colors are coming off onto this acrylic, this turquoise acrylic. It's really fun. It's very smooth and buttery. Always tap your acrylic paint pens on the side to activate them, not on your artwork, because sometimes they just bloop, drop a whole bunch onto your page or painting that you don't want there. So there's your warning. Go define around this little dude's eye. In any portrait or animal portrait or anything like that, any living creature, the eye and the facial expression, obviously not with a bird, but those are going to be paramount. These are, our eye goes there, the viewer's eye goes there. And it's important that even if you're being really sketchy and loose elsewhere, that you get that eye perfect. because if you don't, it will kind of throw off the sketch, in my experience. Without even knowing it, as humans, we tend to look at the eyes as having character, as communicating primarily to us. So another little tidbit. I've been fascinated by birds for a long, long time. In my 20s, I did a lot of working in parks, and one of them was a waterfowl park. So it was my job to go on hikes and bird watch with people and explain the species they're hearing or seeing. Oh, dream job. I would happily work in parks again. Oh my goodness, I love it. You're being paid to observe the natural world, to preserve it, to educate about it. And recently, I just had a solo exhibition called In Flight and Song, an experience of birds. And you can see the body of work that I produced on my website, dottington.us. And we had a great opening. I don't remember how many works in total I showed, but I think it was somewhere around 15, give or take. And they were all sizes. The largest one was 4 by 4 feet, and the smallest one was 6 by 6 inches, I believe. So, it was so much fun. And I was able to incorporate in my other painting style, when I do big paintings in oil or acrylic, I was able to incorporate abstraction, and that kind of, to me, embodies or gives life to the experience of being in nature or whatever it is that I'm communicating. In this case, the experience with birds, my experience of watching them, or me imagining what their experience is when they're singing or flying. I find it fascinating. I've watched birds play, the fact that they actually play and they'll catch hot air currents for the fun of it. It's just amazing when you find nature not just having to survive, when you find it being joyful and enjoying something really truly because they're like, oh, this is fun. It's really fascinating. So I hope some of that is conveyed in those paintings that you can find on my website. And the originals are for sale on there. They really range in price because some are small and some are much bigger and some are, far more detailed than others, just different styles and stuff. But I make prints of mostly all of my work. So if originals aren't in your budget, then head over to my print shop. There's a link to it via my website. Nobody should ever be barred from owning artwork based on their money or financial situation. So that is it for this first little hummingbird sketch. Knocked in some values there. It's kind of quirky, but I don't mind it. And I'm going to grab this little stamp kit. It's those little clear ones that you have to stick to this piece here. And I'm just stamping the numbers. I thought it would be a fun way to keep track of all the different bird sketches, but some of them aren't really sticking to my plastic piece there, so had some difficulty. Moving on. So now I'm just going to work right on the sketchbook paper. This is a travel watercolor sketchbook by Daler and Rowney, the cachette. And it's got a fabric cover, and you can see the little pen loop in there on the right where you can hold I think it's meant more for a brush. That's what I would use it for. But I looked online. I was going to I'll try to link something, but it wasn't easy to find this sketchbook on there for you all. But just so you can, just for your reference, I will relay that information for you. So I'm sketching this with my watercolor pencil crayon. I've just stopped calling it colored pencils, sorry, habit. And I've got a reference photo up here again for you on the right. Wish I could say I took these photos. I got them off of one of the 2 common websites I use that are royalty free for images, because let's be honest, to get really good photographs of birds, you need some pretty good equipment or some pretty great luck. So I use Pixabay and Unsplash for royalty-free photographs that just require, sometimes they just ask that you give some credit to the photographer, which I try to do in the description when I use one during a video like this. Something that drew my attention to this image was the lavender wings and tail feathers. It's gorgeous. I happened to have a lavender colored pencil in my set, and I'm getting used to drawing with colored pencil more often, surprisingly. Look at this beautiful tombow that just matches so nicely. It's like a periwinkle blue. I'm doing some tests there on the bottom. I've got two that are very similar, but I chose the periwinkle one. So the one that's a little more blue, it's a bit darker, but it's perfect for the shadowed areas of these wings. When you get more and more skilled, you can take almost any photograph and make a good piece of work from it. You just edit in your head. But when you're getting started, if you work from a photograph that's no good, it's going to be harder to create a successful drawing from a crummy photograph, whether it's lighting isn't very spectacular, like you're going to have to invent the values. So my advice for any newbie is really make sure you are using, you're choosing your photographs, your resources really well. You're using something that already has a great sense of value, good lighting, colors are rich. Then you have something to try to emulate. And the goal isn't to make it exactly as you see it. I mean, maybe for some it is, but my goal is to make a good drawing or to use drawing as a meditation. It's not very often to replicate the exact reference. I want to make something that looks sketchy. I want to make something that is painterly, that has marks in it. Here I am adding the water, and it's blending the tombow perfectly with the colored pencil, the watercolored pencil. It's so nice. These two worked really well together. And this paper isn't super heavy for a watercolor paper, so it does buckle a little bit, but it doesn't bother me. But as I was saying, I want the marks to show up. Otherwise, I'd be a photographer, right? I don't want to erase the artist's hand. This is the Jane Davenport Epic pen. It covers, like, it usually draws over top of different media very well because Jane Davenport is a mixed media artist, and so she tries to design her materials to do just that. They have to work together. But it is a nib pen, so just keep in mind, like, if I were to put this over top of any sort of oil pastel or chalk pastel, that can get in the nib and just ruin it, like wreck it from working really well. So right now it isn't really flowing for me, so I switched to this water-soluble graphite pencil. I'm going to try to get a brand for you there, water-soluble graphite. I've got a couple different brands here. The one I'm using right now is Derwent, D-E-R-W-E-N-T. I have them in different washes. So I've got a light wash, which is an HB, and I have a different one as well that's like a medium, and it's a lot darker, and they do appear quite differently. So just like with your regular graphite pencils, it does help to have different softnesses, like dark, heavier ones. My drawing students, I always tell them that and I fall into the same habit too, where you just grab your one pencil and you always just use that. You can get through a whole drawing with just an HB, right? You can make it light, you can make it dark, but I really try to urge them, like, pick the right pencil for the right time. Start with a harder one that's lighter, and as you gain confidence in your drawing, you can move to the softer ones that put more graphite down. They're darker. So I'm going to repeat that here. Obviously, you can achieve a lot with just one, and the more skilled you become, maybe the less variety you need, the fewer materials to create the same effect, but I'm always going to recommend that you give yourself a range and you learn when to use each. I love the rust in this bird, and I first laid down a little bit of red. It was just a little too, wasn't rusty enough. It was just a little too bright, like closer to primary fire hydrant red. So switched to a burnt sienna here for the body. I almost said fur. The furry body. I know biology. This bird is furry. Sorry. You're not going to believe that I used to work in parks, huh? Anyway. I'm just layering on top. I'm not blending anything yet. It's almost like a magic trick, is layer, 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 and then see what happens when you add water. Ooh, look at that. It just comes to life. It gets more vibrant, more saturated. I have to be careful not to drag that orange, like I just did, right into his lovely white belly. Oops. Don't worry, I go over that later again with white to get back some of the white on the belly. I underestimated how bold that was. There I go. Trying to fix it. Activate it on the side first. Look at that big puddle of acrylic it made on the bottom of my, oof. Yeah, these are finicky. You have to get used to using acrylic paint pens. They can be a big pain. But when you get used to them, they do wonders. I'm going to add some highlights to the wing. And Posca paint pens come in different sizes. So the one I'm using right here is a white, and it is smaller. I think it's called fine, even though to me it's still quite large. They get really big. They have jumbo ones. So I made sure to get a white in the jumbo size and in a smaller one. So as I dig around here. Yeah, you can get different nibs too, bullet nib, chisel, things like that. So I like the range. They are excellent for way bigger works too. It's kind of sometimes hard in the sketchbook at this scale to use those big markers, but it's okay. Here I am reinforcing the eye with an ink pen because, like I said before, the eyes matter. They really do. So I use this dark ink to just go over the markings on the head and the legs a little. Knock in some of that detail, make more contrast. If your drawing ever feels bleh, first thing you should ask yourself is there enough contrast, which means dark to light. I mean, you can do color contrast and things, but I'm talking about value contrasts. Value contrast. So I just have a little bit of peach to the cheek there. I'm gonna blend it out just a tiny bit. But yeah, value contrast is huge in a drawing. And as soon as beginner drawers go from just using black and white to using color, that's almost always the first thing that goes, is they lose value contrast. And everything, if you squint or if you were to say photocopy it in black and white, everything is the same value, the same lightness and darkness. So I try to remind my students all the time that they need to let go of getting the exact color correct and focus on value. I make them squint all the time. I'm like, sure, you might not have gotten that skin color perfect, but if you focus more on the values, you're going to end up with a more successful drawing. Let's take a closer look at this little one. It's kind of rough, but it's perfect for the sketchbook. On to the next bird. This little one is a jay, I know that much. I am not doing due diligence looking up the species of birds. Hummingbird, got that one. Specific hummingbird, not sure. Please, I would love to hear your comments. If you know what birds I'm drawing today, tell me, just tell me. My life is so full of different jobs and different creating right now that I decided not to look up what exact birds these are and let you tell me. Thank you. Thank you. I'm becoming the queen of delegation. See that? Using a Prismacolor color erase, I am sketching out the shape of this bird, starting with the head and moving into the body. Ooh, here's a nice tip. Oh, by the way, I make this bird shape. He's so funny. I make him with way too big a belly, but that's okay. Anyway, something that I tell my students all the time is start with the hardest part. They like to draw everything but the face if they're doing a portrait. You know, they don't do the eyes, etc., etc. But what happens is it takes some finagling to land the shapes right. And if you finally get the eyes right in a portrait, but they're a little too large, are you going to erase them and make them smaller when you've worked so hard just to get them correct? Or are you going to adapt everything else around it? So starting with the hardest part, then you can get it right. And if your face ends up a little larger than you expected or smaller, you don't have to adjust everything around it. That's a very nice piece of advice that my students are usually grateful for. At first they go, oh, I don't want to draw the face right now. But then they thank me later. So I know this bird has a fluffy tummy, but I think I somehow made it look like it wasn't just fluffy, that he actually had like a really full belly. Like this bird just finished a burger. So the proportion is a little wonky, but I was just scooting along here having fun. You can see me just grabbing that sort of orange peachy color, which is obviously super subtle in this bird's actual plumage, and it's just so bold on the page, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm digging how vibrant it is, and I'm acknowledging that I'm going to layer, and it'll have that little bit of glow from underneath. So I assure you, it's not that I cannot see the difference here. It's that I'm working within a limited range of Tombow colors. And I'm also working kind of fast too. I'm just, this is one session of sitting down and knocking out 3 birds and, getting into that rhythm of just not overanalyzing things and just being in the flow. You'll hear lots of artists talk about being in the flow. When you finally quiet the analytical mind and you're just in the zone of observation and creation, and you're following like whims. You're following different habits you have as an artist, and you're following different impulses that come up as you create. And it's super great to get to that point. And it takes a while to get to that point as an artist. Like when you're a beginner, you're going to be analyzing constantly. And then when you're more experienced, it's not that the analyzing stops. It's that becomes intuitive and it becomes inherent. And it's sort of like something, it's like programming running in the background, allowing you to focus on creativity and exploration and experimentation. And in the background, you've got that analytical programming going, yes, no, working, yes, no, working, so that you can just enjoy more. But I will say it takes a lot of practice before you get to that point. It's like, don't beat yourself up if you don't feel that sense of flow when you're working. If you feel it's a struggle. Believe me, becoming a more skilled artist is a struggle. It just is. It's meant to be. It's supposed to be. If it were super easy, it wouldn't be so magical, right? So you saw me add a bunch of colors, and now all you see is my fist as I hold my pencil crayon like a youngster. I think this is due to some wrist situations I had when I was in my 20s. I've had surgery on my wrist. You can see the scar there, little S-shaped scar. So I don't have, I think, the same grip as I used to. Anyway, what I'm doing now is I'm adding a lot of darker value to the back of the bird where you can see the shadow is. Like I was saying before, a good photograph is going to lead to a better drawing. And this photograph has beautiful light. The light's coming from the left. It's lighting up his face and tummy. And the back is in shadow there. So that's what I'm adding now. I struggle going back to narrate these because I'm looking at the proportions of the drawing and the shape of the bird, and I mean you can hear me smiling, hopefully, because there's so much you want to correct. There's so much that you see is quote unquote wrong. I'm like, oh man, that looks awkward, that's not the right shape. But I'm even questioning, is this even the same photo resource I actually worked from? Yes it is. But I'm being humble and just, you know, drawing attention to that. Look at the shape of the head. I drew it. It doesn't look like that bird, and that's okay. This little pear-shaped bird, the one I end up with, is more pear-shaped, and he's got character. I love him. Okay? And it's excellent practice to be nice to yourself. I really love the scritchety scratches that I just made there. Really exaggerating floofy texture on the belly. And look at this colored pencil activation, all this value. When I laid it down, it was definitely not that dark, right? And now it's so rich that I've got it on my brush, and I was adding a little, I was able to like add little tick marks on the wing. I erased them with my other hand just so that I could bring in marker because of how fine these little stripes are on the blue part of the wing. I should probably try to redraw this bird at some point because the most amazing things about this picture aren't really conveyed in my sketch, but I think it's the texture of the wing, how detailed that is versus the soft kind of plainness of the rest of the brown body, the shape of the bird, the shadow on the back. Like, there's a lot that I could learn from trying this the second time. Tip number 422, draw things a second time, even though it might test your patience. If you want to learn, draw the same thing again, and again, and again. And each time you'll find you try something different, you adapt and grow. Coming in hot with the Posca paint pen in white. Adding in some highlights. That was too much. Do you see that highlight in the eyeball? Yeesh. I'm using too big a pen for the size of my drawing. It worked really well on the wing though. I need to do more sketches that are full sketchbook pages in my sketchbook with Posca pen, like landscapes. Anyway, I'm coming to a close on this sketch. I hope you enjoyed just hanging out with me and that you always pick up a couple different tips, at least a couple different nuggets of wisdom. If you're interested in more like step-by-step tutorials, let me know and I can make some for you. And there he is. Thank you for hanging out with me in the studio today to do some bird sketching, and for sure leave me a comment if you want to share what you created. You can always contact me on Instagram and I'll go check out your work. I would love that. See you next week.